What if you didn't have to choose between staking your crypto and actively participating in DAO governance? Well, today's guest has cracked exactly that challenge. Dennison Bertram is the co-founder and CEO of Tally.xyz, the platform pioneering liquid staked governance. This allows token holders to earn staking rewards without sacrificing their voting power. Dennison, welcome to Token for Your Thoughts.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, we have a lot to cover today with Tally, but as always, let's start by hearing more about you and where your journey started. What were your aspirations and interests growing up? Anything aligned to crypto at all? Was it totally different?
No, I wouldn't say it was totally different. Obviously, we didn't have crypto when I was growing up because I was growing up a while ago. I'm sure someone was thinking about it. I was really into robotics when I was a kid. That was something that I really loved. I think probably if I would do anything over, I'd probably get into robotics. It definitely took a lot longer to become the thing that it's becoming today, which is, what I probably would have been really excited about. But yeah, I think originally, robotics was probably my first love.
Okay, interesting. So quite futuristic.
Yeah, it is. It is. People don't generally know this, but there's actually a whole personal robotics revolution in the 1970s. Now, I'm not from the 1970s, but companies sold robots for your home in the 1970s that would drive around and do things. People don't know that. It's really wild. But microprocessors weren't really that good, so they didn't really take off. But they existed, and now it's it's 50 years later, and looks like we're finally going to get robots in the home. So it was futuristic, but it was also the past, and it's the past and future, I guess. It always has been.
I didn't know that. So did you work in robotics, or was it more of a hobby?
No, it was definitely a hobby. All throughout high school, I had this mentor who worked at I think it was Sandia National Labs, sort of like a pen pal that had this whole stream of robotics at the time, which was based around building machines without microprocessors. But I actually went on to do a whole career in creative fields before coming back to crypto when I got involved in Bitcoin in 2011.
Okay, very cool. So you've been on the creative side and on the technical side. So how did you make the jump from creative to, you said Bitcoin in 2011? Is that
Yeah. So when I first read the Bitcoin white paper, it clicked for me immediately. I remembered pretty vividly 2008, what had happened there. I was an adult already during September 11th, 2001. And so I remember very clearly what happened there. And it was just obvious to me when I read the Bitcoin white paper, that was just oh, of course, that makes total sense. And it really clicked with a lot of sort of more fundamental ideas I had about the direction of society and direction of technology, all in told. The transition came pretty naturally. One of the early use cases for a lot of crypto were things like supply tracking. So I worked with many of the large fashion houses. I was based in Milan at the time, doing projects around supply chain tracking using blockchain. There was a project a long time ago called Proof of Existence, which was started by this guy named Manu, who went on to be my sort of first real crypto boss. He was one of the founders or co-founders of Open Zeppelin. I was early Open Zeppelin, which is the sort of leading security firm in Ethereum. And back then I was working on a project to put art and photography on the blockchain for provenance. But this is in 2013. So, predating NFTs by, 5 years. So yeah. The transition happened pretty naturally. From there, it was just next opportunity.
Okay, got it. That's cool that you said that you read the Bitcoin white paper and it resonated immediately. Just that makes total sense. Because I think for a lot of people, it can take a while, or it could just sound really bizarre and strange at first.
I think it's probably a bit more relevant to people then than it is now, mostly because the world today has been shaped by it. So it doesn't seem as revolutionary as it once did. But, you know,
Hmm.
when it came out, it was really pretty fundamentally wild, right? Like, you know,
Hmm.
we can make our own money because money isn't real. It's not a real thing. And I think like today, you know, people actually probably generally have that feeling that money isn't real and that like the economy isn't real and it's all just sort of like, you know, some sort of fiction that's like dictated to them. But I
Hmm.
think, you know, back in like 2008 and, you know, through 2009, people still really sort of like trusted a lot of aspects of like the financial system in a way that they don't today, right?
That's a really good point because I always love asking this question. When did you find out about crypto? What was your original reaction? And that's actually something that I haven't heard before, is that the importance of the timing, because I think, like you said, that is such a good point of when you hear about it, because yeah, a big financial crisis as it
Yeah.
was. You're right. If you're in the midst of that and then you read something like the Bitcoin white paper, it probably has a different impact than
Yeah.
reading it, fast forward years later.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, with your background, with being in the creative industries, then coming into blockchain, how has that shaped your approach and vision for Tally?
Sure. So Tally, I think the creative industry is probably not so much of an impact. I think, you know, I was a political science major in school, so I had a lot of training. I was very fortunate to study under a number of really influential people, and I spent a long time in Central Europe as well, doing like, you know, post-communist transitional economy stuff. So I had a very sort of strong fundamental like economics and like political science sort of background.
Hmm.
And one of the things that, you know, really influenced my thinking around Tally when, you know, myself and my co-founder started it was really thinking about how like I like our original investment pitch was basically I just wrote up this. I had been building a company prior called DApp Hero, which was
Hmm.
basically this really easy way to build Ethereum dApps without needing to code. This is
Okay.
2017. You know, you just added like little script tag to your like Shopify and you just had your NFTs or you had crypto like just in your website. It was a
Nice.
little too early for that. And that's right when COVID hit.
Okay.
And, you know, sort of everything dried up. It was just like a small sort of like initial round of funding, you know, so like the money ran out. And I just, you know, wrote my investors back. I just created this, you know, little Google Doc and basically it was one page, maybe 1.5 page. And I sort of said, this is what I think actually the future is going to look like. And a big part of it was, look, if we think about the history of corporations, if we think about the history of like organizations, even money fundamentally, there have been these really substantial increases or substantial like improvements, you know, things like the joint stock corporation or LLCs and stuff like that. And what I pitched was, well, what if we could drive the cost of capital formation of incorporation to zero, right? Like, what if we could incorporate organizations in software rather than incorporating them in jurisdictions, right? And, you know, the real idea here was basically use smart contracts, really build on top of like sort of lessons of the DAO and like early Vitalik's, you know, thoughts around like world computer and say, well, if we can incorporate organizations and software, then we can drive really massive amount of like efficiency into making, you know, truly enormous organizations that are, you know, global by default. You know, early on, I thought about how like machines could natively be co-equal members of these organizations, which was very prescient because, of course, today that's actually starting to happen. So it was more of this sort of like idea of like, okay, what is the sort of general trajectory of the world? You know, most of the value of the world is in corporations, right? It's like the kind of the largest sort of sink of value out there. And yeah, that was a big part of the sort of inspiration here, combined with my real attraction with the ideas of like decentralization and like Web3 and privacy and like self-sovereignty, sort of like combining those all into like, well, now that we have software that allows us to do consensus on a network level with things like Bitcoin and Ethereum, we could build software that enables consensus on the social level in organizations. by building these tools directly in things like smart contracts.
Right. Really interesting. What was it like going from, being in a job to becoming an entrepreneur, or have you done, other entrepreneur sort of endeavors previously?
Yeah, so I have kind of always been an entrepreneur.
All
I started
right.
the first or one of the first Bitcoin exchanges in the Czech Republic in 2012, which was kind of a really wild experience.
Well,
So I've always been kind of like a founder type.
okay.
Um, if I do it all over, maybe I would have like moved to San Francisco right after school. But I was like an East Coaster, and like I went to college right before the dot-com bubble burst. Um, Dating myself a little bit, but uh, you know, if I had done it all over, I probably would have done that, right?
Hmm.
Founder culture today, of course, is like totally different. It's like super advanced and like, there's all these different pipelines into it. But I was always kind of like building different things and sort of trying to build a business, really recognizing that like most of the value that you can have is like really created by yourself, right?
Hmm.
And I was based in Central Europe at the time, so there were a lot of things that weren't sort of like a practical opportunity. So it was really like, okay, I'd always, I remember like I'd moved to the Czech Republic in the year 2000, and I remember like hustling to get internet, like
Wow.
it's like dial-up modems. There's in the land of internet cafes, like trying to like
Yes.
sneak some time in like university libraries on machines. So it was like a very different kind of like world. I kind of forget where I was going with that, but like it was kind of just like a different time, and I've always been really driven towards building things. I think,
Hmm.
no one, the idea of like founder mode didn't exist in the late 90s or early 2000s. But that's what it would have been, right? Like,
Hmm.
now, of course, I clearly recognize that I was born to be a founder, and, it doesn't really matter. I'm always gonna, my wife likes to talk about how, I'll say things like, oh, I just want to like buy a farm and live on the farm, or like move to, some small island and just like relax. And she just like laughs. She's like, you're never gonna.
Yeah, just in builder mode, there'll be another idea that comes
Yeah.
along.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right, so this was not your first rodeo then. So it was just completely, I guess, normal for you to come up with another idea and decide this was the problem that you wanted to fix, the solution you wanted to create. What unique challenges do decentralized organizations face in governance, and how does Tally address them?
What unique challenges don't exist for decentralized organizations is probably the better way to phrase that.
All
They're
right.
enormously complicated, right? Like, I'm sure the Joint Stock Corporation didn't get it right day one. We are only a couple years into this, whereas, corporations have been at this for hundreds of years.
Hmm.
Uh, some of the nature of how these organizations work sort of like preclude the ability to use some of the things that we've learned from existing sort of structures. So you basically have all these people on the internet, and they're all trying to like coordinate together, and that can be very difficult, because something that I think I personally didn't appreciate when starting this out was how much things like corporations benefit from geolocation, right? Like if
Hmm.
you or I were to start a company, we would both be in like the United States, or, maybe we would both be in like San Francisco, and there would be like pretty clear unspoken norms, like, how much does it cost to live in San Francisco? How much does lunch cost? What are our working hours? What are our holidays? These things are like, when you're geolocated, like when you're like close to one another, these things are like, you sort of take them for granted. But then when you open up these organizations globally, suddenly you have things like, people work totally different hours. So, you have active participants who, never overlap in time zones, right? So they never
Hmm.
feel the efficiency of working synchronously, right? Or like being able to like do have real-time communication. You have, DAOs frequently, or decentralized organizations, they frequently run into disputes around like what is the appropriate salary for paying people, right? It's very
Oh, yeah.
different how much like somebody who's really smart and talented in Vietnam makes versus somebody who's smart and really talented in San Francisco makes. And it's not
Hmm.
based on how smart or talented they are, but it's based on just, how much does the person who owns the thing you live in demand from you to allow you to let you live there, right? And these things actually propagate through organizations as a kind of friction, and that's not the only kind of friction, right? Like there's a lot of friction. The Biden administration really, or I should probably say more like Gensler, really set up an environment for failure for a lot of kinds of organizations by creating kind of arbitrary rules that that sort of like required builders and entrepreneurs to do kind of like these like yoga acrobatics to really like fit in all these sort of like regulatory holes that were like innately designed to like make it very difficult to actually coordinate and operate. So you see these difficulties around coordination, around coming in consensus on things, on how to spend money correctly, all these kind of things that like actually do exist in corporations, but the difference is they exist in public here, which is unique. And thus far, we've generally had like an ethos of decentralization, which sort of like spoke against the idea of kind of like a leader. And that's also been very difficult because a lot of people do enter into things where they say like, what's going on here? What are we supposed to do? And the answer of like, that's your job to figure out is not always one that like really transcends very well. So yeah, there have been a lot of challenges, but there's been a lot of successes, right? Like, the organizations on Tally, we started with one DAO, originally Compound, like 5 years ago. Today we have hundreds. People have moved over $1 billion on our platform using our tools. Over 40 million addresses, Ethereum addresses, can access and use our product. We have millions of users and have onboarded hundreds of thousands of new participants. And that's wild. That's wild. So, and these organizations are worth, some of them are worth billions and others are worth hundreds of millions and some of them are worth $5. But what's interesting about that is that the sort of like structural cost of sort of like technically setting these things up remains so much lower than traditional institutions, right? You can do crazy things, like you can build an organization that has global membership and billions of dollars, and maybe it exists for 15 minutes, right? And that's like a crazy thing. And like maybe today it doesn't really seem like very applicable to have a organization with tons of money and all these participants exist for 15 minutes, mostly because it's not possible today, right? You can't go to the Delaware courthouse, sign the incorporation docs, almost make it out the door and come back in and cancel it, right? Like that doesn't exist, right? You don't even have a bank account by Thursday, right? But you could certainly imagine now a world of thousands of AI agents that come together to do one thing. They see maybe one opportunity, some sort of like programmatic resource somewhere on the internet they can access, and all the AI agents decides to pool resources and administrate that for 15 minutes, which is a lifetime in picoseconds, right? When you come to like how fast computers operate. And that's the kind of thing that you can do on Tally, which you just couldn't do before, right? And you look at the teams that use the platform, the Uniswap, Arbitrum, zkSync, Wormhole, right? These are like the leading organizations of our industry. And they use this tooling to come to consensus. And sometimes it's really messy. Like sometimes it is exceptionally messy process. But, Rome wasn't built in a day, and Rome doesn't have any straight roads last time I checked. So, there's pluses, there's minuses, but it's definitely a step forward for, humanity and machines in general. And it's definitely like proving itself to be a new form of the corporate entity, right? Like you definitely see organizations now choosing to launch tokens on Tally rather than go to the public markets and launch, like become public companies, right? They're actually choosing a new path, a new organization, new design, and they are worth billions of dollars, and they're building the future of internet infrastructure, of the future of our tech stack that powers the world, right? You just look at the pervasiveness of things like stable coins and how the administration has adopted blockchain tech. So, it's definitely working. It's super hard, right? And it's a crazy honor to be, just the, sort of industry leader here doing it. But yeah, it's, we try.
Yeah, it sounds like you're doing a really good job with those figures and some of the projects that you're working with that you've just named. So can you take us through how you're working with these projects and the features and the services that you're offering in order to help them solve all of those issues we just talked through?
Yeah, so Tally today has basically three core services. One is launch. That is where we help these organizations go from, Delaware C Corp, founder led, maybe small team, to, a tokenized protocol where you have, any number of participants, smart contracts that, power and manage protocols and manage treasuries, tools, to operate all that. So launch is our first product. We have operate, which is the sort of like core governance and operations tooling. So you can choose to be like a decentralized organization where everyone votes on things. You can have a sort of optimistic governance thing where you have like the founders that propose things and then team, like people can sort of veto it. You have a council structure where you could have just experts who sort of operate the ecosystem. And then most importantly now, if we built out the modular composable value accrual stack. And this is our first part of this offering here is actually staking, which you sort of started out in the introduction. Staking and governance staking, which is the tools by which these protocols can actually return value to token holders. And it's done in a very modular way. So, you can do things like plug into governance staking, which, relies upon participation in, coming to consensus and decision making as part of the staking process. You can loop that in with network staking, when you have like nodes and validators together. So we give you really the full suite of tools necessary to really succeed and build organizations at kind of massive scale. And yeah, it's kind of like you can pick any one of these pieces or you can pick all of them. But that's generally the stack. We have some teams, most recently Obel, the distributed validator network. They are using the entire stack. Some teams we support more in governance, and Uniswap, the Uniswap DAO voted us to be the service provider that powers the front ends and tools around proposals and delegation and that sort of stuff. So a lot of different pieces here. It's kind of become the real, we've been around for 5 years and we've really in that time managed to build this like complete infrastructure layer, software layer for tokenized organizations.
Mm-hmm. So going back to the launch feature that you first mentioned, what are the benefits of launching a token with Tally compared to other offerings?
Yeah, I think most people tend to think about launching a token as just like airdrop, click and go, click and go. That's a shame. That's a shame. For most organizations, the airdrop is the highest value moment that most protocols get. It's really not a replaceable amount of leverage that a protocol has over the wider audience, wider community, right? It's extremely powerful because they can use it to identify who they want to be their token holders. They can identify who they want to be the political power brokers in their protocol. They can drive marketing. It's really a go-to-market opportunity. And Tally really thinks of it as very holistically, right? So when you launch on Tally, you work with us, or we work with you to really understand all the value of a token launch. And that includes a lot of things before actually there's even an airdrop button, right? So, that's like working with the teams to create educational materials and outreach materials to folks that they might want to be governance participants. That is working with teams. We've built a product with Wormhole called MultiGov that allows their airdrop to happen on many different chains simultaneously, right? That was claiming from Solana, Ethereum, Base, think Optimus and Arbitrum as well, maybe some other networks there too. So we're able to service our teams in just a very different level, right? A very different way than just a claim button, right? Most of our tools include a pre-registration step where, people, basically have an opportunity to stand up and say, hey, I believe in this protocol, and when you claim your tokens, I would like you to delegate voting power to me, or I would like to be a prominent member of these councils. And that's all, very well explained. It's all very well built. And then, of course, we have the whole services arm that helps with, things like recommendations on where to set up your organization, whether it's like Cayman or BVI and stuff like that. So we really, not only have the experience of doing it for some of the largest organizations in the space, but also have the experience for doing it over and over and over again, right? And then tying it into the complete success toolkit that we offer, right? Because most, you can sort of build an airdrop and then people click and then they're done, right? Whereas like, Tally, now you have a home for your organization. You have all this follow-on tooling. You have some actionable next step for the users. You really harness the energy of your community in a way that like most other sort of like offerings don't do, or don't have the platform to be able to do effectively at scale with the network effects that Tally has.
Yeah, as you said, the airdrop is that one moment. You can't replicate it. So it makes sense to do it right and make sure you're maximizing all of the opportunities and really finding the right group of token holders who are going to be those early adopters. So on the governance side, what unique challenges do decentralized organizations tend to have on the governance front, and how does Tally address those?
Generally, I think the most obvious one is confusing and it's hard, right? Like to participate in governance, you have to like know where it's happening, and you have to know what to do, and you have to know what is requested of you. And, generally, a lot of things are in flux now because the administration has sort of changed, and we're waiting for like new rules to update the definition of what decentralization is, what the different kinds of permitted organizations are. Miles Jennings over at A16Z has been doing really interesting work around the DUNA, which would, basically allow us to onshore decentralized organizations, out of Wyoming, which is exceptionally exciting, right? Like, historically DAOs have been not made in America thing, and the ability to really say, no, now they are made in America is extremely exciting, right?
Yeah.
So Tally helps you really solve, in the governance space, it really helps you solve the how do you do this question, which is enormous, right? Because without it, you have to have people who have different skill sets and different familiarity with things like smart contracts, create, executable code to execute on, DAO smart contracts, like things that are very hard and complicated and dangerous and risky, right? One of the reasons why teams have chosen us to transfer over $1 billion is that our tools are very safe. They're very easy to use. You clearly see what's happening. You know what's going to happen. You can simulate the outcome of these things. They have a level of confidence in our tooling that is just really unique in the space, right? There's many organizations that have multiple platforms, and when they go to do something like transfer, $100 million, they choose Tally to do it on.
Awesome. And you mentioned the multi-gov feature that enables DAOs to operate across multiple blockchains. How does the multi-chain approach enhance governance and participation?
Yeah, so multi-chain is actually really interesting, right? And this is a very interesting product. So we've built it in partnership with Wormhole, and the first user is the Wormhole DAO, right? And the Wormhole DAO is kind of like the prototype of the user, right? Wormhole has built this really incredible platform where you have to, say you can send messages between all these different blockchains. But what that means is their protocol exists on all these different blockchains, and it has to be operated across all these different blockchains. And operating things on just one chain is hard enough, but now like bridging the information of operations from one chain to another, especially something like between Solana and Ethereum, is an incredibly high bar, right? Like that is incredibly difficult, right? So we've built this product with a multi-gov that allows you to do that, right? So now you can have a protocol where your participants can be on wherever your chain is. You could be on Arbitrum, you could be on Solana, you could be on Ethereum, and they can all participate in the decision making of how the entire protocol is governed. Because otherwise, you end up in this situation where the Arbitrum people can't participate in governance on Ethereum, but maybe the Ethereum people can't participate in governance in Solana. But the change that happens on Solana has to get propagated to Arbitrum and Ethereum. And that's where multi-gov really shines, all right? And that's like really solving problems for these multi-chain organizations that have to keep in sync the operations of smart contracts and really valuable infrastructure across countless numbers of blockchains, right? And if that's incredibly difficult, right? That's just an incredibly difficult job.
Yeah, that's definitely a lot of work. Otherwise, if you're operating across multiple chains, the multi-gov feature seems like the perfect solution for that. So Tally also emphasizes credible neutrality. Can you talk to us a bit about what that is and why it's important?
Absolutely. Credible neutrality is the idea that your infrastructure is credibly neutral. That's not picking winners, right? And this is important. Something I like to say is if you're building on Facebook, you're the next Zynga. And if people were sort of remember a long time ago, and there was this game called Farmville, which was like this huge breakout hit. And I actually had the opportunity to meet the founder of Farmville during ETH Denver. I was sitting next to him at dinner. And I remember him like just casually mentioning, oh yeah, I created Farmville. He has a Web3 gaming company today. And I was just like blown away. It was like a celebrity status to me, right? I was like, oh, because Farmville got like millions of users in like hours, right? Back before that was a common thing, right?
Yeah, it was huge.
It was huge. But the thing was, it was so huge, it was so successful that Facebook, which it was built on top of, Facebook got jealous. And they effectively rugged them by changing the properties of Facebook such that Farmville was at a disadvantage to, brand new Facebook's own gaming ecosystem. And we see this happen a lot, right? When Elon bought Twitter, right? Like they changed the parameters of the API. Reddit has, they took away the API. So all these people who are building on open APIs, they got rugged, right? And that's what credible neutrality is about. When you build on top of a centralized Web 2 application, you are actually at the mercy of that Web 2 application. And the thing is when you build on infrastructure, if your thing is ever valuable enough, the underlying infrastructure has an incentive to take it from you, right? And that's because there's just, that's just capitalism and the fact that they own the infrastructure so they can do whatever you're doing just a little bit more efficient because they sort of, they can verticalize the whole thing. So what that means in the blockchain space is if you are building a protocol, you need to know that the infrastructure you build on is safe. That the process by which political disagreements are mediated is neutral, that the process by which the parameters of the network are changed or upgraded are fair, right? Because otherwise you could build something on top of a network and the network could steal it from you, right? Or they could just very subtly change parameters such that it disadvantages you versus their own sort of like native offering, a la Facebook changing the nature of like their APIs. I think even if you look at like Apple, right, the ability for them to like change how the software works or change how you are required to pay for it means that you don't really have that much control over your own destiny. So, and that shows up in the choice of L2s that different tech stacks use, right? Like Arbitrum is a really great example of like a long-running, very decentralized organization, and Tether has chosen to build TUSD on top of Arbitrum. And a big piece of that is that Tether knows that Arbitrum cannot change the underlying properties of their network such that it would somehow disadvantage Tether, right? Because when you look at things like L2s, for example, you can't fork L2s. You can make a claim that you can fork L1s, although even that is kind of changing because of the nature of like stable coins and them being kind of centralized. But Arbitrum is a credibly neutral platform that you build on, right? Like they can't get a court order that says, hey, censor this transaction. And, some group of people say, okay, well, we have to abide by it. We're going to censor this transaction. And, when we talk about that, generally people are always thinking about it being America, but it doesn't have to be America, right? It could be China, right? It could be North Korea.
Yeah.
It could be anywhere, right? And knowing that you can't force the Arbitrum infrastructure to unfairly make changes is really critical in you being secure and saying, okay, I can build $100 billion application on top of this. And I don't have to build the infrastructure itself. And I don't have to be afraid of the infrastructure. I can trust it. I can participate in this ecosystem. We are also owners of this public infrastructure. So that's what credible neutrality is. And it's critically important to the long-term success of anything. Because again, if you don't have credible neutrality, at some point, you can't trust the underlying infrastructure.
Yeah, that's a really good point, definitely, because like you said, if you're going to spend a ton of money building something, it's important to understand that the platform you're using is safe, you're not going to get rugged. I didn't realize that's what happened to Farmville. Like, wow, I mean, there you go. Yeah. What an example of something that just became huge. And then just like that, Facebook comes in, swoop, that looks good. We'll take a piece of that.
Yeah.
That's great that you emphasize that. And I guess it provides a lot of peace of mind to projects that you're working with. So you guys also offer advanced features like gasless voting and delegation. How do these features improve accessibility and engagement for DAO participants?
Well, yeah, I think a great gasless voting just means that you don't have to have ETH to vote, or you don't have to have any tokens in your wallet to vote, and you just sign a message and, we put it on chain for you. That's obviously very convenient because it means that you can be a participant with an address that doesn't hold any money, right? That's a big deal. We recently delivered that feature to Uniswap, the Uniswap DAO, and, huge uptake right away, right?
Nice.
It's convenient. It's easy. You don't have to pay to participate. And why should you? Right? Like it's like you bring your own lunch, right? Like, oh, okay. I mean, I guess bring your own lunch is a bad example. Most people do bring their own lunch. But, actually, if you're stuck at work all day, like, the work should probably pay for lunch, right? Otherwise, you would have just like cooked or, done something else. To participate to participate in these organizations, like, the organization is $1 billion. They should cover the cost of like, you having to like operate the organization. So that definitely drives just like drives the barrier to participation a lot lower.
Yeah, I like that approach. I also like the idea of more companies paying for lunch too. That would be great. But that's interesting that you share that there was a huge uptick as well in participation. For organizations wanting to increase engagement, that's something else that's really interesting to think about. So what has it been like building in the crypto space? What kind of challenges have you come across and how have you worked through them? Are there any examples that come to mind?
Oh, gosh. Building in the crypto space is hard, but it's not as hard as it used to be. I mean, part of that is that Tally is just comprised of such smart people, smart engineers. Like I can't thank my co-founder Wrath enough for his skill and his talent and his vision in helping with the company, right? Like I could not build a software stack this good on my own at all, ever. So just really thankful to have a team that is so good to help us do that. The tech has also gotten way better since we started. Like 5 years ago today, night and day. It's wild. Like today, there's so many great tools for you out there to help actually build on the technical side. Building a business in crypto, like when the mood is good, is exceptionally fun. When the mood is bad, everyone's like pretty depressed. But it's nice because you kind of have an ecosystem, right? Like there's a place where crypto people, it's Brooklyn. There's lots of crypto people. What are you into? Crypto. We're crypto people. And that's nice to have kind of like a home on what you're building. I wasn't a super big Web 2 person ever, but being a JavaScript developer feels a little bit less like a community. It's sort of like, lots of people do JavaScript. It's not such like a niche. So, what that means is there's a lot of like conferences. This is actually the bad side too. I'm the CEO, kind of like public face. I have to travel a lot, and I have kids, a family, but I have to be on the road a lot, and that's very hard. That's very hard, right? Because you're just like out there selling, but that's kind of like the nature of what you signed up for.
Yeah.
And crypto historically, the past 4 years has been enormously difficult because of the administration of the reign of Gensler, right? I had started an NFT project, Dope Wars, at one point, and I got subpoenaed by the SEC for creating an NFT
No.
project, which was free. It was like free giveaway. Everyone could just claim it. Like
Gosh.
what did I do? you know,
Oh,
then you spend, tens of thousands of dollars, like just responding to, just
oh,
like
that's
that sort of
awful.
stuff where you're like, the
Yeah.
past year and a half, 2 years, we were just like, do we have to leave the country? My wife also works in crypto. Like, do we have to like relocate to the Bahamas, to the Caymans? Do we have to like go back
Wow.
to Europe? Like what, all this uncertainty. Now, of course,
Yeah.
there's a different sort of uncertainty going on.
Yep. Yep.
But assuming we make it through this patch, we may
Mm-hmm.
get a lot of clarity, right? We may
Yes.
have an administration and a nation that says, build the future here in America, right?
Mm-hmm.
Launch your token here in America. Build your exchange here in America. Build the future of finance here in America. And that will make it very different, right? But of course, it also changes the game. Then crypto maybe becomes a little bit more like JavaScript, where it's like, I'm a crypto person, where that maybe means a lot less. And, it's sort of like, I'm a computer person. Like, what does that mean today? Right? Like 20 years
Right.
ago, it actually
Yeah.
meant something, right? Like,
Yeah.
you'd have friends who didn't own, well, more than 20 years ago, but like 20 years ago, you'd have friends that maybe didn't own computers, right? Like they would
Gosh.
be like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
I use the one at the internet cafe. It was like 25 years ago now, whatever, it'd be like, I use the one at the internet
Yeah.
cafe. I use the one at school. I use the one in the library. I don't own my own computer. And of course today
Yeah.
that's crazy talk, right?
Yeah.
But that's kind of happens also with crypto, where maybe the ability to sort of like self-identify will go away, which might make it harder as a builder. But it's been very nice to build something that felt like the future for a long time. Now that the
Yeah.
future is now, it's a little different. It's like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's been very hard. So I think it's a definitely strongest survive kind of environment. You really have to
Yeah.
love the ideals, and you have to really love the vision to deal
Mm-hmm.
with sometimes just like how difficult it is, because it'd just be so easy to just go build a dating app or a API
Right.
service, or you know what I mean? Just some little
Yes.
product that everyone swipes their credit card and pays $5 a month for the rest of time. You know,
Yep.
that would be wonderful. That would be great. I would love it, right? Instead, we're out here trying to like reform like the core foundations of like corporate identity, you know?
Yeah. Just that. That was going to be my next question is what's your approach and how do you deal with that during the hard times? And do you kind of lean on, like you were saying, just the vision and the ideals that you believe in? How do you persevere through the difficult times?
The leadership at the company is fantastic. But I mentioned Raf already, but we also have Frizen. People know him as Frizen. Just our brain trust is really great. Obviously I have a family that's very helpful. I think it'd be very difficult to do this as a single person. I'm
Mm-hmm.
a bit older, so I have a little bit of different perspective on the world. I kind of believe you should just like, keep failing until you either die or succeed. Just do, like, bias to action. Like, there's that thing that people love to say on Twitter. You can just do things. Yeah, you can just do
Mm-hmm.
things, right? And,
Yep.
and, as a founder by nature, I would rather just do it for me anyway. Right. So,
Yep.
sometimes I say, I'll say like, well, if this company is a success, and my wife will correct me and be like, you've transferred over $1 billion, Dennison.
Yeah.
You're a success, right?
There you go.
Like
Love
you
that.
you you started this from like a little Google Doc, and now you're here. Like, it worked, right? So, I think it's perspective and enthusiasm and just having that sort of like builder spirit. If this is like my opportunity for shout outs, it's like a lot of the Twitter family, there's just like a lot of great people on Twitter. There's a lot of awful people there too. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of
Mixed
great
bag.
people, the mixed bag, but there's a lot of great people there who are like, you can hit them up and be like, this is really fucking hard. And they'll be like, yeah, but we could do a meme coin. And then you're like, oh, and then, so it's like the extended
Yeah.
crypto ecosystem also makes it
Mhm.
worthwhile, right? Like you're kind of doing it for your buddies too. You kind of want them to think what you're doing is cool, and you kind of want to impress them, and you really love it when
Mhm.
they impress you, and you like it's like a team sport in a weird way. And even if somehow it didn't work, it worked anyway. Like, sometimes
Yeah.
I think we forget that, we could get focused on sort of like the wrong things. It's like, no, we came to make a difference and change the world, and that's exactly
Mhm.
what we're doing.
Yeah, exactly. It's impactful, important work for sure. So looking ahead, what is ahead for Tally? Do you have any big goals you're working towards in the next year or so? And what role is Tally going to play in the broader adoption
Sure.
of DAOs?
Yeah, so we have some exciting announcements coming up that I can't share yet. But so we have some cool stuff coming up. We are definitely leaning very hard into like value accrual frameworks, giving these protocols a sort of like last piece in becoming really powerful organizations.
Mm-hmm.
Really expanding more into sort of like the stablecoin RWA space in general, sort of
Yeah.
understanding the sort of like needs around that kind of tooling. Staking
Mm-hmm.
is our number one priority right now, really helping teams turn on staking and value accrual mechanisms, use them for incentive design around how protocols operate. So yeah, like no shortage of big thing. Like you never get the wheel all the way up the hill. It's just like, oh, there's a higher hill, right? So a
Right.
lot of big stuff coming soon.
All right. Very exciting. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you want to touch upon before we wrap things up?
No, I think we really did a great job of digging into kind of everything. I think hopefully the listener, wherever you are on the highway listening to this right now,
Yeah.
feel like they come away with like a really good understanding of like what we're doing. I would definitely say if you are a builder, if you are building a protocol, if you are building an ecosystem on some sort of tokenized organization, to reach out.
Mm-hmm.
It's tally.xyz. We can help you through the token launch process. We can help you through operations, through governance, through value accrual. We can talk you through all of these things. We can help you. We've done it for the largest, best teams in the space. We can definitely help you. And we would love to be your partner on your journey as well.
Nice. Well, Dennison, thanks so much for joining us today and sharing everything about Tally. You guys have got a lot to offer. Projects out there, you're already working with incredible projects. Thanks for taking us through everything and how people can find out more. We'll drop all the links in the show notes to your website, social, etc. But this has been such a great conversation. It's absolutely flown by. Thanks for coming on the show.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, that's it for today's episode of Token for Your Thoughts. Make sure to subscribe and follow the podcast for more conversations with the leaders shaping crypto and Web3. We'll see you on the next episode.